Welcome back for part 3 on powerful team retreat planning. Let's get back to it. On the subject of costs and how that affects choices, there's the actual dollars and there's actual perception within the organization. We worked with a client a little while back and they decided to host a virtual retreat rather than an in-person one for just that very reason, because of the optics of how it would hit the team, right? Do you think that's wise with the younger generation of people who, are critical of like, why didn't I get a raise while the corporate jet is running? Or do you think that was a lost opportunity to not bring the leadership team together in person?
Sometimes if you cannot do a retreat, okay, having a, facilitated mini retreat. One of the things I had done several times is we called them an on-site, off-site, right? So we can say, listen, let's pretend that we're actually off-site somewhere, but we're going to spend 2 days doing planning meetings, right? And it was a retreat, but it was on-site. Okay, and part of part of making that work is to actually get everyone to say, yes, the computers are off, the phones are off. Yes, we are going to be 100% present here. It's essentially, doing a whole bunch of ground rules. But how different is that from, gee, a half day, management planning meeting, right? And I think that there's a fundamental difference between it, because if you sort of take a look at that on-site, off-site as just an extended management meeting, then there isn't the planning that goes into it. There isn't the differentness where a very specific objective is achieved by going through a number of activities and work beforehand and work after and conversations. Sometimes, there's family, well, gee, I want to see my daughter's recital or baseball game or whatever it happens to be. Or I got to look after the kids and everything. And very often when you do these on-site off-sites, or if you do the virtual, etc., you don't get the intellectual and emotional buy-in that's needed to achieve the objective of the retreat, in the first place. So what do you do about it? You say, well, if we can't do that retreat, what's the next best thing, right? Let's not give up the planning. Let's not give up the ground rules. Let's not give up a bunch of of these other things. But let's also realize that it's going to have a different kind of outcome. You'll not be able to move the needle as far as you will if you actually get people off-site together in a way where they can actually focus on whatever the objective is that they're actually going to do, right? It won't be the same, but sometimes you have no choice. The issue of optics for everybody in the organization, I think that, if you've got a corporate jet and it's party town and let's get all the executives into that jet and go to Hawaii and yeah, just have a wonderful time and everything. That just sounds kind of weird, right? On the other hand, okay, if as a result of the retreat, there's actually things that come out of it that people actually see, people will see that actually things have actually happened, right? Not everybody, by the way, is aware of what the senior leadership does with their time, which, by the way, is another issue. Okay, the retreat can't solve, but on the other hand, it usually isn't that big of an optics thing. And when the retreat is a reward for achievement. The President's Club for sales, as an example, or the all hands retreat in Las Vegas for all 200 people. Okay, because we as a group met our goals. You know what? A little bit more is not a bad thing. And if you had to cancel that, that would send a message too, right? So
We talked about lots of things that could go wrong, but how do we set it up for success? What are the elements that go into planning a retreat? What is the process? Randall, are you going to share all of our secrets here today?
there's no secret. Okay, it's all common sense. But we've got a 12-point sort of process to do it, and I think it's important, maybe even before I talk about planning, is to talk about the different roles, just very briefly, that there is in a retreat. And one is the logistics planning. Let's book the flights and book the hotels and let's make sure schedules are clean. Okay, so that's typically like a meeting planner or an event planner kind of person. That's the title, but it's really more logistics planning, making sure there's swag, that everyone gets the baseball cap and the pen with the company's logo, or all that kind of like administrative kind of stuff. If you don't do that well, it's doesn't happen, these retreats, magically. So that's that. The second is the content and the flow planning, the structure of the retreat itself, which I'll talk about in a minute. There's a facilitator, that's another role. There's the trainer, that's another role. The best retreats often have the facilitator and trainer. If you can get them to be the same sort of team, that's better. The executive, well, they've got a particular role, in the attendees, right? So if we think about all of those different roles, here's that 12-point plan. Okay. We have to determine what's the objective of the organizer, and at that particular point, they probably have some additional ideas. They'll have some initial ideas of kind of what they like. We'd like to do strategic planning. We would like to build a common leadership, upskill our team's leadership capabilities. We would like, whatever it is, okay? And the second sort of step of that, if you will, is interviews that we would do with all the participants. For the CEO, it's if they're not the organizer, it's what's their objective? What are they hoping to get out of it? What are the issues that they see as top of mind in their organization? For everybody else, what do they want to get from the offsite? What are the issues that they're taking up their mind? What are the opportunities that they think might be interesting to explore? Anyway, so all those interviews, but we can't do those interviews without doing a huge amount of research beforehand. Because how can we possibly walk into an interview without understanding the industry and the particular organization as well? After that, the interviews and the research and meeting the person who's our key contact, the organizer, putting together a draft agenda. Once we've got the draft agenda agreed to, we'll craft the presentations and the run of show, the activities, etc. Excuse me, some of the fun activities, etc. That the logistics planning person will do all the organizing to actually make that happen. Whereas we would focus on the facilitation and the training and the flow of the day as well. Once we've got the draft version of the presentations activities, at that point, we'll actually come back and we'll review and approve. Here's kind of what we're looking of accomplishing. Here's kind of almost, a walkthrough of the slide decks if we're using slide decks or the other activities, etc. Once we've got that done, then it's a question of finalizing that and also starting to work on all the pre-prep. Okay, what is the pre-prep that everyone's going to do beforehand, right? It takes time to do. What's the monitoring that's going to happen to make sure that they actually do it? Is it a reading? Is it a survey? Is it some pre-meetings? Is it teamwork? Okay. If depending on the client, we'll set up a portal. So everyone might have access to that before, and sometimes we'll set up the portal afterwards. They have access to it afterwards. So once that's done, there's a communication plan. Everybody has to be on the same page. We want the CEO to be able to send something out. We want the person who's organizing it to send certain things out. We want to send things out. Why? Because we want to work on setting the expectations and making sure everyone understands kind of what their role is and what's going to happen and everything. There's all the logistics, which the logistics person will take care of. Then there's rehearsal. You do not walk in as a facilitator or as a presenter without actually doing a lot of rehearsal. And we want to make sure that we're at the top of our game. So we'll do all that. We video, we critique. Certainly at the Brain Trust, Rania and I will critique each other, etc. Then we arrive early. We don't just show up with everybody else. Why? Because we want to make sure the room is set up the way we want. We want to make sure that the technology is working the way it needs to be. Is the room set up the way we actually want it? No matter what instructions that we give to the venue, they'll get it right 80% of the time. 80% of the way there, and as a result, we're going to move tables around. There's not a line of sight. Gee, people are going to have their back to it. Wouldn't it be more effective here to do it in a U shape or half rounds or whatever it happens to be? Gee, there's not enough flip charts in the room. Gee, there's flip charts, but there's no markers in the room. Like there's so many different things. Gee, it's impossible to see the screen because it's in some funny angle. So all that kind of stuff has to happen before anybody from who's an attendee is actually there. And then we're kind of on stage. And we're on stage, certainly as facilitators, as trainers, from the moment we're actually there. Why? because the learning and the relationship building, particularly the learning, does not happen just when people are sitting in their chairs during the retreat. So much of it happens in the conversations that we would have between sessions, at breaks in the morning, in the evening, beforehand. Somebody says, gee, when we spoke in that pre-interview, we talked about such. I've been thinking about it, and we learned things. We may have a question. Maybe there's a number two person, and we would like them to sit in a particular place and to watch out for one thing or the other, or that we want to let them know that, hey, can we call on you for something? Or people just ask us questions, right? Recently we did a leadership retreat where we did a lot of leadership training, and people ask questions about us, about leadership to us, and I'm in a situation of such and such. How do you think you'd handle it? So all those kinds of things, even when we're not presenting, we're literally on stage. After that, there's follow-ups. Okay, right after, because people may ask us for things, and people may ask the leadership and the meeting, the logistics person. So there's follow-ups. Afterwards, there's a postmortem. How did it go? Right? What was really effective? How better? Excuse me. Any observations, quick observations we have? If we're setting up the portal for everybody with all the resources, a bit of a portal walkthrough. And then 30 days later, the impact meeting. What was the impact? Were there any obstructions? Were there any observations? And so on and so forth. So if you think about all the planning required to actually go through, if you took, big chunks of that away, what do you think of the effectiveness of the retreat will actually be? The risk level goes way, way up, and the probability of success goes way, way, way down. And let's be very clear here. The goal of the retreat most of the time is not the retreat. The goal of the retreat is to accomplish something that will stick well after the retreat. And it's very hard to do that unless you've actually gone through those 12 different points. One of the things that I think is a great thing to consider is, and we've spoken so much about what can go wrong, but what can go right? What can go right? The objective can be achieved. It can be a stronger team one, like the leadership team. Better relationships, misunderstandings can be mitigated or erased. The team can be motivated. They can be more all in. There's greater alignment when the information that you talk about is cascaded down, and momentum. There can be momentum. It could be a kickstart for whatever you happen to be. And I think those are a lot of the important reasons why spending the time planning and executing a great retreat, should be part of the mix of what a team actually does.
Everything we talked about so far, of course, applies to all different types of teams, but if we laser in on how virtual companies and work from home teams, how that specifically affects retreat planning, um, talk to me about that. How does having a virtual team affect decisions around the retreat planning? So for example, if I'm talking out loud, if they are, so infrequently together, would one consider having a longer retreat to make up for lost opportunities? Whereas with an in-person, day in, day out company team, you could just pull it more in and out. Or, would you sort of highlight and feature the different isolated employees more? Like, for example, you do a workshop, which is, teach me your superpower, and have everyone sort of like share more about their skill set.
So, there's a lot of research that says it takes 2 to 3 years for a management team to gel, right? Really, where they can start to finish each other's sentences, right? And so the question is where is your particular team on that particular journey? If you're near the beginning, there's a number of new team members, different people have been switched responsibilities, maybe there's been some corporate changes, divestitures, mergers, etc. Maybe there's a new plan, maybe there's a new investors, maybe there's a new CEO, but the team's the same, etc. So at the very beginning of that, relationship journey, what you might choose to actually have and how often you get together and the is going to be very different. The issue of whether people are remote or whether people are all in one office, I think is it speaks to um, why retreats are so important, critically important when the management team is dispersed. You need time to do that gelling. If you're in the same office every single day, you're in the executive hallway, if you will, there's a lot greater chance to um, build the relationships bit by bit, serendipitously almost, the water cooler conversation, or hey, do you want to just grab a sandwich downstairs? Those kinds of little things that happen. So you have to make sure when teams are dispersed that you bring them together at certain key times, right? It's very, very difficult to sort of run it and build a team and get that cohesion when you don't. That being said, I really think it's a question of what's the objective and where that maturity of that team actually is. So let's just say you've got a team that is really, really gelled. They've been together for 4 years. They know each other's strengths, weaknesses, etc. Sometimes you take a look at the retreat and say, maybe the objective of this upcoming retreat isn't something tactical. Okay, like we need to solve this problem, or strategic. We need to do strategic planning. It's the end of the cycle, etc. But maybe when there's a bit of complacency that fits in, or comfort, maybe that's a better word. Maybe the goal of the retreat is to shake things up. Okay, and there's several techniques we can use to do that, and to I don't want to say get people out of their comfort zone, but to say, okay, we've been sort of growing this organization at a certain level, etc. How do how do we, instead of saying uh, our plan is to 2x the organization, how do we 10x it? Okay, how do we, can we do some planning, some scenario planning where we actually take a very, very different look? Can we take a look at how we might disrupt the industry or transform our organization? There's so much stuff that's new, whether it's AI or the international competition, or oh my God, there's so much that could be disruptive, right? So sometimes it's okay, let's take the team that actually is working really well together and let's push them in a way to consider beyond what the normal actually is. And that's where some of that growth happens with mature teams, right? Sometimes it's to say, okay, we've got all this brain power. Let's apply it to a very specific problem. And because everyone's coming from a different perspective, they can solve a problem in a particular division, or a problem with a particular process, or an external problem, new regulatory legal regime, new competitor, and a new technology, or whatever it happens to be, and everyone will be able to attack that particular. But the idea of taking people outside of that comfort is something that's very important. Is it because of virtual, or is it because everyone's on the same executive floor or the same department sort of area? It depends on where they are on that maturity curve.
I know you certainly don't like to generalize, but when we think about the type of person who's attracted to a work from home role, okay? They have a certain lifestyle, they like their privacy, they're taking care of, things at home. Maybe they're introverted, maybe they don't like smells and sounds and are sensory. Who knows all the reasons that they work from home, okay? So we see this certainly that sensory issues and taking care of children aside, younger generations don't want to be in the office. They like their space, they like their to make their own choices, their privacy. Um, would you think that it's possible that work from home employees don't want the retreat in the same way, like we're assuming that it's going to be some reward and some amazing experience, but they don't want it?
So I think that so first of all, when we're talking about retreats of senior people, okay, they've got a particular job. They understand that this is part of what makes a great leadership team, etc. So you're talking about either a departmental retreat or a lower level retreat where people are, see themselves more as employees as opposed to the leaders of the organization. So let me address that particular thing, because there are department level retreats, and frankly, even some executives have families and they don't like to, they like to work from home as well, right? So what I would say to that is this: if the organization has figured out how to manage people properly in a remote or hybrid sort of sense, and believe me, many organizations haven't cracked that nut. Okay, part of the social contract is, okay, you can work from home part of the time or all the time, but you also have to be willing to get together at certain key times of the year. We might have there might be an industry conference we expect you to attend. There may be a retreat that we or a kickoff that we might expect you to attend. And those things aren't negotiable, right? And so if that's part of what the social contract is, right? If that's kind of the work conditions, the trade-offs, et cetera, that's good. I think where we get into trouble is where there's a lot of assumptions being made. There's assumptions from leadership that it's okay just to sort of say, okay, this is what we're doing, and that's it, and forget about all of your personal stuff or your family situation or a million other things. There's a head in the sand from some managers who'll say, I just don't want to, I just don't want to deal with that. The dog eating my homework is not the kind of manager I want to be. I'm just going to pretend this dynamic doesn't exist. And there's some parts from employees who are a little bit immature about the fact that they're being paid a wage to actually do something. And part of it includes some things that they might not like to do, it's not all just fun and games. And so, if you've got retreats that sort of help bind you and build like bind you to your colleagues and build a collaborative, creative, innovative, problem resolving kind of way, it means that you'll be more effective as a remote worker. And I think that if that isn't part of the expectations that are being set on hiring, whenever there's a change, we work from home, remote, and hybrid, et cetera, in the annual objective setting, performance reviews, okay, in the communications about why the retreat is necessary and what everyone is expected to benefit from it and everything. If it's just, I don't know, they're expecting me to show up and I don't know what a waste. Like really, okay. The problem is that the people who are running the retreat need to be a lot more sensitive. Okay, and the people who are attending the retreat need to understand that there's a reason for it, right? And so it takes a bit of work on both sides.
For employees that are unable to attend for any given reason, right? We plan them in advance, someone has their kid's wedding or something's going on in their life. What would you say about, broadcasting, using Zoom and all the tools we have now that we didn't before to allow that person to participate or catch up with
So
recordings?
if you're doing, listen, if you're doing like a company retreat, you're doing a reward for achievement type retreat. If you're doing the annual sales kickoff, like any of those kinds of things, and somebody has COVID or somebody's uh, you know death in the family, like things that are important. That's life. Those things happen. You can't attend. Okay. But when we're talking about leadership retreats, and there's 6 to 20 people, I mean, depending on what the purpose and dynamic and all that kind of stuff is, and one person doesn't come because of it, better be something that's pretty important, pretty important. Okay, because everybody, there's no hiding in the weeds in these retreats. Everybody's got a very specific role to play, right? And so it's almost to the point of saying if that person can't come, that member of if the CFO cannot come to this retreat, okay, perhaps we shouldn't have the retreat, right? Perhaps we should see about this is so expensive to make this kind of change, right? But it's that important that everybody be there. The more people that are expected to be at the retreat, the less important each individual person actually is at the retreat. But can you imagine if the purpose of the retreat, let's say you've got country managers from every country or business unit heads from every single business unit, and everybody's on the same page with respect to what you co-create in the retreat, except for this one person. Okay, so you say, well, what if we just pipe them in via Zoom? So I guess something is better than nothing. But I think one of the things we realize now, years after COVID, that when 5 people are in the room and one person is on Zoom, it's very, very, very hard, or 2 people on the Zoom, it's very, very hard to pay attention to the screen where that one or those other 2 people are and have them fully, fully engaged. And it's very hard when you're remote to actually be fully engaged because you know that as soon as the Zoom session is done, there's going to be the post meeting conversations as people talk about what we just talked about and everything. So you miss all that, right? So it's really, really hard when somebody's not able to come for a one of these act of God kind of things, right? Some death in the family or something like that. The bigger the group, the less of an issue it is, obviously.
Of course, we could use our imaginations to think of what could go wrong at a retreat, but for the people out there who are not effectively planning or taking that part of it seriously, maybe there are things that can go wrong that's not on their radar.
Yeah, so oh man, a big, big laundry list. Okay, here's a few of them. The objective not achieved. That's something pretty wrong. How about locking in the wrong culture, right? If the thing goes sideways, you're gonna be locking things in. Everybody on their computers or on their phones going like this the entire time, basically disengaged. Interruptions, right? People sort of sticking their head in the conference room saying, "Oh, so and so is here; they want to speak to you," and people getting pulled out one way or the other. Um, Reputations, taking a hit or even being ruined because of things that actually happen one way or the other. Well, what kind of things? Well, maybe people drink too much. Maybe there's people that are doing drugs. Okay, maybe there's hangovers that innocent flirting, right? Things that maybe make people less comfortable and might hurt the working relationship afterwards. And by the way, make for discomfort actually at the event itself, right? There's a whole bunch of other things as well, but a lot of them are preventable. A lot of them can be managed, mitigated, and planned against, right? And if we do that, then we can start dealing with, what goes right, and we talked about that. We talked about that earlier.
Remember our conversations, Randall, it would seem that offsites are this, golden opportunity. And we're here to help plan right and land that plane and all that good stuff. But why why aren't retreats like a given across the board for organizations? Why is it still like
Most
abstract?
are. Most organizations do them. However, we had this little thing several years ago called COVID. Okay. And that sort of stopped everything. Okay. But what it also did, it started virtual and Zoom and Teams and all that kind of stuff. And we don't need to fly back and forth and build those relationships. And well, we're not doing retreats either. And so now that COVID is long behind us, okay, there are like a huge number of organizations that say, hey, listen, this particular management and culture building tool is something we've got to be more comfortable with. So we're doing them, but not everybody is doing them. Why? Because we're still sort of have that hangover from that post-COVID sort of era. We're in the post-COVID era now, right? And I think really the question is, of all the different things that we have as leaders to, grow our organizations, grow our people, make things actually happen. Um, you know, where does retreats fit in? Where do good retreats fit in? How do they fit in with the coaching? How do they fit in with the management meetings, with the cadence of goal setting, with all the other stuff, right? Now, and I think that's really the issue that many management teams need to get their mind around. Let's use all the tools that are at hand, not just some of them.
Randall, I'll give you the last word. What would you say to leaders who are perhaps unconvinced or jaded or, trying to get a higher order retreat going? What are the key considerations you want them to take away?
If you really don't think as a leader the retreat has got a spot in how you lead your organization, you may be right. We don't have all the answers, right? But I would challenge you and say um, maybe it's the way retreats have been handled in the past. Maybe it's the way they've been planned. Maybe it's the people that have actually led them. Maybe it's they were not done at the right time, maybe a million other different things. And I think just having that conversation, give us a call if you like. We'd be happy just to have a conversation and not to prove you wrong, but really just to explore, some of the challenges that you have. And if it turns out that the retreat isn't the right way to go, we'll say it. And if it turns out that maybe a retreat is, we'll say that too. And we're happy to put some skin in the game just to have that kind of conversation.
Thank you, Randall, for this conversation about retreats. And thank you to everyone who's listening in. If any of the issues we talked about today resonate with you, if you have an upcoming retreat, offsite, team training, virtual, in-person conference, we are here to help you make it a big success. So do reach out, info@randallcraig.com, or follow us on LinkedIn. And looking forward to seeing you next time.